So the Federal Reserve, are you ready for the truth? Can you handle the truth? We're going to find out, because here is a crash course on the Federal Reserve System and what they do. Now, before we get into this, I would always suggest that each and every single one of you watching this read two books. One of them is called The Creature from Jekyll Island. It's all about the Fed. And the other one, if you can even find it, is called The Secrets of the Federal Reserve. Those are great books. That's where a lot of this knowledge comes from, and it's where a lot of my teaching comes from. But let's dive into this crash course on the Federal Reserve. The first thing that the Fed does is it controls monetary policy. So what is monetary policy? It's pretty much everything to do with money. It controls interest rates, as you've very much seen this year. They're raising interest rates 7 times to combat the inflation that they created. We're going to cover that in a second. So they control monetary policy, which in monetary policy is the interest rates and how much money is printed by the Treasury. So those two things are incredibly important and incredibly relevant to what's happening right now in this country. So if you remember, back when the pandemic happened, the Fed decided that they were going to print 5.1 trillion. If you go back to 2008 and fast forward till now, they've printed over $10 trillion in money. So you want to talk about controlling monetary policy? That's a big one. The more money they print, the less money your current dollars are worth. But not only that, the more money there is in the system, and who benefits? Well, you do, and institutions do, and businesses and Wall Street and banks, all of them benefit from more money in the system. So you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what's so bad about that? Well, when you print too much money, you put all that money into the system, and then you control interest rates by keeping them super low to stimulate the economy. Boom! Inflation happens. Runaway inflation. Just like you saw back in the late 70s and 80s. Just like you are seeing right now. But who's in charge? The Fed. Because they control monetary policy. Number 2. Now, this is not going to be in any books, and you might not like what I say, but I think when you look at the Fed and you look at who sits on the board, you got to ask yourself some questions. Because there's some very wealthy and powerful people that sit on that board, some of the wealthiest families in history. I'm not going to name them, but I also have a feeling that Satan sits at the front of that board. Because some of the things the Fed does, I only feel could be accomplished by none other than him, Satan. So let's move on to number 3. The Fed is not owned by the government. The Fed is a private institution. The Fed is not a government institution. Most people think because the word Fed is in there that it must be in cahoots or owned by the U.S. government. It is not. And sometimes when we really dive deep into this, if you read The Creature from Jekyll Island, you'll start asking yourself, who's in control? The U.S. government, or is the Fed in control? And I will tell you with utmost certainty, the Fed is in control, because the Fed controls monetary policy. And monetary policy is money. And money is the backbone of this country and every other country. So, and then if you really dive deep into it to really understand it better, start studying wars and who funds those wars. Well, where you'll land is none other than the Fed. And Satan, I'm sure, is making some of those calls. So moving on, we got number 4. The Fed is also in charge of maintaining an effective and reliable payment system. So when you think about an effective and reliable payment system, you think about our current payment system we have in force today. You think about the central banks. You think about the banks that you go to deposit your money. You think about the banks you go to get loans. And you think about how everything works from credit cards straight down the line. They are all controlled and maintained by the Fed. One of the ones that is not, or not yet, would be crypto, specifically Bitcoin and Ethereum. So when you think about crypto and everything you've learned about it, if you've read anything about it, it is decentralized, which means not under the supervision and the maintenance of the Fed. Now, I say that loosely because I'm sure the Fed will find a way to get control of that too, because that there comes right into line with this 4th one, which is a reliable payment system. Can't have a good old Bitcoin out there screwing up our reliable payment system that we've created, actually, it's all about control, folks. If you really want to know what the Fed does, the Fed controls you, controls your money, and controls everything. All right, moving on. The fifth thing that the Fed does is it regulates banking. I think you already knew that. But the Fed is in charge of the central banking system. The Fed controls, regulates, and pretty much tells banks what they can and cannot do. So let me give you a quick story. Right now, the Fed is raising interest rates well in their control. They're doing that 7 times. You've already seen mortgage rates go from last year 3.01 to today 6.66. Kind of funny that that's exactly where the 30-year fixed is when I just told you that Satan sits at the board. So you can see how big of an increase that has been at the cost for the American public trying to buy houses or everything else. So when you talk about that, let's go into one other thing that's very important to understand when we talk about how banks are under the control, the oversight, and the regulation of the Fed. Why, if banks, which have your money, because they're controlling your money because you gave it to them as the deposit, why is it that banks have not increased the amount that you're earning on your savings? You didn't even think about that, did you? Why is it that the interest rate is going up every single month this year, but yet your savings account is not really paying you any more interest? Why is it that the interest rates are going up and you're not getting any more on any of the other money you leave at the banks? Well, it's because the Fed regulates banks. So the Fed, behind closed doors, you can look this up, went to banks and said, hey, listen, we don't want you to lend any more money because we're trying to get this inflation thing under control. And you guys are out there lending all this money, which is giving people more money to buy more things, which is making inflation run hot. And even though we created this inflation thing, we gotta slay it. We gotta get it back under control. So guys, stop lending money. And not only that, I got a great way where you can kind of make this work, where we can slow this whole thing down, is let's not pay anything on savings accounts. Let's keep savings accounts at the same rate because we really don't need people's money right now. We got lots of it. We just printed 5.1 trillion. So what we're going to tell you is just give us your surplus money. And this is the Fed saying this to the banks. Just give us your surplus money. We'll pay you an interest rate on it so you no longer need to lend money out. We'll just pay you interest on that money. That should get things in control. Control, control, control. The Fed regulates banks. So when you get pissed off that it's costing you more but the bank's not paying you anymore, point your finger right at the Fed and say, bad doggy, bad. They won't do anything, but hey, that sounded good. The sixth thing you need to understand that the Fed does is the Fed lends money to governments and to banks during crisis. You just saw this during the pandemic. It was a crisis. So who did the government borrow money from? None other than the Fed. They control monetary policy. So when there's a war going on, i.e. Ukraine and Russia, and we're meddling in that, giving Ukraine money, who prints that money and lends it to the government? Yes, the Fed. So if we were to get into a war here, like another world war, who's going to fund that war? Yes, the Fed. It is a money war. I hate to say this, but the book teaches this. War is a money-making activity for the Fed, which should make you absolutely sick, which should make you absolutely think about everything differently today, and should absolutely give you the mindset that it is time for you to take back control of your freaking money. It is time for you to be the bank. And that's exactly what you're going to do. You are going to take back control of your money. You are going to be the bank. And you are going to start right now. Because the next thing you need to do is watch this video. What in the world is going on? Recession incoming. Folks, the recession's here. It's going to get worse. So watch this video to learn more. And if you like this video, make sure you click that little subscribe button. And also click the alerts button so you're notified every time we put a new video out. Now that you're pissed off, I want you to go and read one of those 2 books, The Creature from Jekyll Island and Secrets of the Federal Reserve. See you next time.